All right. Well, good afternoon, folks. Thank you for being here. Another third Thursday for South Florida Arboriculture and Landscape Professional webinar series. Um, we'll go ahead and keep letting folks in. If you've got questions, you can put them in the chat, but we'll try and address everything like with some Q&A at the end. And without further ado, I am going to pass it off here to this week's speaker, a fellow horticulture agent, just a county north of us, Yvette Goodiel. And so with that, I'll just pass it off to you, Yvette.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about this, and I I'd like to start off by finding out a little bit more about you all and who's in the audience today, who's here with us today in this virtual room. So please, in the chat, if you could put in your name, the type of work that you do, and your favorite seasonal event. And I'm gonna ask Natasha and John are gonna moderate the chat for me. Let me see if I can see it. Okay, I can see it. So yes, your name, I'll put that in the chat too, or
Are you seeing it come in, Yvette?
yes.
Okay.
Please tell us your name, type of work. So we got okay, Public Works Director, welcome. Advisors. So any favorite seasonal events that you all have? Barbarous. Oh, the county fair seasonal event, yeah. Fall cool down for sure. I felt like there was a bit of a cool down yesterday. We were noticing that. Oh, please. When the bromeliads bloom, okay, yeah. Thanksgiving, right. That's a good one. Lots of food and cooler weather. Florida in the winter, right? There's a theme. We've been going through all these super hot weeks and months. And oh, the start of football season, yeah. Summer rains. So yeah, so those are some good examples. Thank y'all for adding to that. So we do notice the seasons and celebrate them in different ways. And so I'm going to go on here. So my name is Yvette Goodiel. I'm with the University of Florida IFAS Extension office here in Martin County, and I'm the Sustainability and Commercial Horticulture Extension agent. So I work with commercial folks, landscapers, farmers, nursery growers, and I'm happy to have you all together with me here today. So we just talked about our, y'all shared some of your favorite seasonal events, and these all most of the events that you shared pertain to the timing of life cycle events in nature, whether it's cycles of rainfall, cycles of temperature. We had, I think there was one that was, well, most of it was focused on temperature blooms, cycle of blooming of plants with the bromeliads. This picture here, this is a picture of a swallowtail kite, and those arrive here in Florida in the spring to breed. And so that I put this one in because I was just talking to someone the other day that's their favorite seasonal event is when they start to see those swallowtail kites. I'm sure for y'all that have seen it too, it is so neat to see. such an unusual, beautiful bird. Um, and so like the title of this talk, we're going to be talking about phenology. And so when we've just said, you know, all these seasonal events, particularly seasonal events around the life cycles of plants and animals, that's what we mean by phenology, is the study of the life cycle events of plants and animals. So with this presentation today, I want to share with you what phenology is so you'd be able to describe it to others and examine how phenology plays a role in the work that you do. And in case you're interested in taking it further, look at some ways that you might want to contribute to phenology citizen science and or make use of that data in your work. And so, but also, you know, I'm always nervous when I talk, but you know, I want to step back and bring in the other side of this, which is I like this topic because it's a new way to connect with our work and appreciate with you how your work in the landscape, the farm, the park, working with trees and plants, um, gardens, how that is a form of environmental stewardship. And you are an expert on the lands that you manage, and you're already observing phenological events. And so I hope that you'll consider today's talk as a recognition of the work that you do and as something that brings more joy to your day to day, especially when you may be dealing with this daily heat warnings. And I'm sure that, you know, for all of us at times our work, and especially out in the heat, seems endless and at times very repetitive for all of us at times. So what you do is of tremendous value to all of us. And know that, and that we need more plants and trees and people like you who have the fortitude and the expertise to care for them. So let's move forward with that recognition in mind. And turning back to phenology, phenological events include the leafing out of plants, and like this one pictured here, and it gives us a chance to notice and tune in to these changes that are happening all around us. And here in South Florida, you know, it may be the beautyberry leafing out or the spring flushes of new growth on an oak tree. And those are part of our phenological activities here in South Florida. And flowering, the bromeliad flowers, fragrant flowers, flowers of all colors, shapes, and sizes. And the maturation of agricultural plants. In some parts of the country, we have wheat fields. We have corn and tomatoes and squash and rice and so much more. And all of these, their fruiting times are phenological activities that play a direct role for us in terms of the food that we eat. And also the emergence of insects, pest insects, but also pollinators like butterflies and moths, and insects that can be pests but are also food for other wildlife. And the migration of birds, like the hummingbird pictured here. So a way to sum it all up is that phenology is nature's calendar. And in your work, you are nurturing all of the animals and insects and plants. And you do this cooperatively with the seasonal changes in temperature and the seasonal changes in rainfall, and with the insect and bird migrations and the fall and leaf out of deciduous or semi-deciduous plants, and the seasonal displays of flowering and fruiting plants. This is all in the sphere of the work that you do every day. So let's talk about phenology for you and your work. So first, here are a couple of ways I can think of that it is relevant to landscape professionals. But please also in the chat, add your thoughts as I talk about this, and we'll circle back. Um, so one way that people talk about the value of phenology data is for the timing of pest incidents. Pests are going to come in at certain times of the year, and we'll give a couple of more specific examples of that. But knowing those times of year and when we're going to have to deal with these pests allows us to be more targeted and efficient in our approach to managing them. And then plant selection. If you're doing work to select plants for the landscape, you may be considering things like what different colors the plants will offer in terms of the colors of their leaves and their flowers, and also the timing of that color so that it can be more or less year round. When it comes to fruit, what fruit will be produced. You may be more and more folks are getting into landscaping for wildlife, and when are those fruits going to be available for birds? When are those flowers going to be available for pollinators that we want to attract to our yards and our landscapes? When are leaves going to be on the trees to offer shade to us for our buildings and our places we like to recreate? So those are a few examples. Yes, and also watering. Yeah, knowing how much and when you're going to need watering, which would be, and that brings in an important part is that the timing of these events, these life cycle events of plants are closely tied into our climate, our availability of rainfall, our temperature. And in that way, all the work that you do is also ecology. And so the way that I became, well, here, let me share another example. And just the joy of it, this is a close up of a beauty berry flowering in my backyard. And before this, I might have tend to just overlook it, but being a part of this phenological observation network gave me a reason and a focus to get out there and see it and take notice of these beautiful things going on around us and look more closely at the things that we see every day that we might take for granted. And also to think about these interactions in the environment around us. So the way that I got interested in this work, I was living at the time doing a grant funded job in work in New Jersey. And I was working with some of the folks from the Department of Natural Resources. And I went to lunch with a botanist and some other folks from the office. And as we were walking to lunch, the botanist was stopped to notice a weed growing there along the sidewalk. And I asked what he was doing there. And he told me about phenology, that he was, as part of these daily walks in this tremendously urban, area, that he was noting, these signs of life and these flowers and the timing of them. And I found that inspiring and heartening at a time when in some parts of my life I was disconnected from it. And then later on in tracking my backyard garden planting, if you planted a garden and you've noted the timing of when you planted and relative to rainfall and temperatures and things, just thinking about that. And then my degree is in ecology, and that's the study of the interactions of plants with other organisms in their environment. And I like how the study of phenology includes how the timing of these phenological events is synchronized across the food web. So it reminds me that whether we're in an urban environment, an ag environment, or a natural habitat, we are surrounded by this interconnected web of life, living web of plants and animals and insects, and they're all adjusting seasonally and moving through their lives. And taking notice of that brings me joy. And so I hope that this brings you some joy as well. So thinking of young birds as one example, they're going to need insects to eat. And then the birds are going to rely on plants for shelter and food. They're going to need those fruits and berries and seeds. So the timing of those events is going to matter, when the plants are producing their fruits and seeds versus when the birds are needing them, when the insects are arriving for the fledglings to feed on. So in those ways, it's an illustration of how interconnected all of this is in the landscapes around us, whether it's an urban landscape or ag or rural or um, and we can start to see those patterns as we're tuning into the phenology around us. And in doing this, and doing these observations and looking at this data, scientists have observed that insect emergence is often synchronized with leafing out in their host plants, which you would think would make sense. But, sometimes we might take it for granted or assume and not know. But that's what phenology helps us to tease out and find out, is how this web of life is synchronized together, and how important it is, the timing of different phenological activities in providing food and shelter for other parts of the food web. And I mentioned my garden tracking. If you're a farmer or a gardener, you need to know when to plant to avoid frost. You need to know the schedule of plant, crop and insect development to decide when you're going to be harvesting, when you need to apply those, maybe a pesticide or a fertilizer to support the growth of your crop, or use other integrated pest management techniques to manage those pests that may be coming in certain times of year. And so here's one example. I'm going to pull in a couple of examples from a group called the U.S. National Phenological Monitoring Network. And so they've got a lot of great resources on this topic, and they've been doing some deep dives in terms of how people engage with phenologic data and make use of it in their work. So I'm going to share just a couple of examples in this presentation. So this is one, the managing this forest pest, the Willie Adelgid Phenology Project. So they had volunteers that were recording the life stages, the phenology of this pest, and then using that data to inform the timing of releases of biological controls. So they'd be releasing those when that pest is active and vulnerable to biological control. And then this data can also help them research other methods for managing this pest. So having that life cycle data of that pest is helping in managing it, protecting the hemlock forest. And then another that they interviewed was a landscape company, Rainbow, in this case, Rainbow Tree Care Scientific Advancements, and they shared that they are arborologists uses the accumulated growing degree days to predict when a pest may become active. So, so those, growing degree days, they're able to use that data that is provided by, in this case, the NPN, the National Phenologic Network, is providing this data. And I'll show you, I believe they get the data from the USGS and they provide it in their tools online. So I just did a report from it yesterday just to see what the data are. So you can see here we are at August 20th, and the lines represent the blue is the 2026 accumulated growing degree days. So these means the days that are above 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Different crops and pests would have a different base temperature, but for the purpose of this illustration, this is the standard that they use that I'm sharing with you. And then in 2025 is the yellow line, and then the 30-year average is the black line. So you can see, yeah, it has been a little hotter than normal, I would say, and that blue line is slightly above the 30-year average. And so, again, so this is used because many plants and animals are going to leaf out, bloom, or emerge once you reach a specific heat accumulation threshold. And so you can look at this to see, okay, well, on average, we reach this threshold this time of the year, but also by monitoring it, you can see when you might be reaching that threshold sooner that would trigger an earlier pest outbreak, for example. And that's how the Adelgid network is using it. And then, yeah, I already shared this year's is just slightly above normal. So here's another one. This is from the Davy Tree Expert Company. And so they're using it similarly to the other I just shared for geographically specific pest forecasts. And again, using those growing degree days to inform their pest management programs. So this is a picture of the emerald ash borer, and that's one of the ones that I believe they said they were managing. It's not yet an issue in Florida. If you look on the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Sciences website, this is a pest that they're watching for in Florida. It attacks ash trees. It has not yet been observed here. But I went to the US National Phenology Monitoring Network and pulled up the data for this. And so you can see for all these years from 2021 to 2025, this is the proportion of observers who said, yes, I went out to see if I saw the emerald ash borer, and yes, I did. So you can see that there are a couple of peaks during the year across all years. Usually there's a largest peak here. So yeah, across the past 5 years, and this is across the United States. You could drill into a smaller area, but across the United States, live individuals of this pest were observed between mid-April and mid-August, with a peak in mid-May and a smaller peak in mid-July. So that's the kind of data that is helpful as a pest manager, wondering the time of the year that you would need to manage this pest. There's some data to help support those decisions. So, and then as far as sources of phenologic data, I've mentioned the US National Phenologic Network a couple of times. And so I'll talk about their work and other sources. So one resource historically has been the records. It could be a journal written by an early naturalist like Henry David Thoreau. There are other cases where a person, made notes on the activity of plants and animals in their yard over the years, just something they enjoyed doing. They put it in writing, and now those resources, that data is available to compare to current times as far as the timing of the blooms of those plants and the activity of those animals. Um, Another was that they often talk about is a person who went hiking on this trail um, through the mountains and just started noticing the blooming of these mountain wildflowers and started recording data on it on each of his hikes. And that provided this really amazing long-term database on changes in those bloom times over time. Um, so could be people making observations. It could be satellite data. Satellite data can show landscape scale changes, green up in the spring or loss of color in the autumn. And then we also have our herbaria. So this is a picture of an herbarium specimen. And you can see that at the time it was collected, it was flowering. And there's a date, when it was collected on the herbarium specimen. So now we know that this plant, with its scientific name, we know what plant this was, we know when it was collected, and we know it was in bloom at that time. Or if another sample was collected, it was in fruit, we know it was in fruit at that time. So that data can be gathered and give us an idea of the timing of fruiting and flowering um, historically and into current years. And so, and we're not going around in our daily lives talking about phenology using that term, but we are observing those events in our lives, noting when a favorite plant is flowering, visiting the mountains to see the fall leaf color change, or getting out to the water to fish during snook season. So we're all observing and interacting with phenology in our daily lives in different ways. And there's a lot more to learn about phenology. Um, we don't have complete records of when pests are active and when fruits and flowers are emerging and how those things may be changing over time. And so you might want to join together with other citizen scientists in observing and recording phenology data. And you can do that as part of the US National Phenology Network's Nature's Notebook program. And so that's where a group of volunteers get together and make notes on the phenology of plants and animals in your yard, areas where you work, any areas that you visit frequently. And you could join an existing phenology program or organize your own for data collection, research, or education. There are several campaigns that they offer. One is Quercus Quest. There's one or more that track seasonal sources of pollen, which is important for allergy, being aware of when allergens are going to be at their height in our areas. And here in the Treasure Coast, I recently began a local phenology program that I'm going to be talking about later. Um, and I also wanted to share that, because you may be thinking, well, this can be fun or this is interesting, but what happened? What is the value of recording that data, of going back and getting those historical records or enlisting the help of volunteers? How does this contribute to science? And again, here, the Phenology Network, the National Phenology Network, has some great resources where they've been able to collate how researchers have been using the citizen science data that they are making publicly available. And so I'm going to share a couple of those examples with you now. So this is one, tree health in late season frosts. And I know, usually I would say, oh, we don't have so much to worry about that in our region, but we did just have a tremendous uh, freezing event or two in our area. And this is a picture of the sea grape in my backyard, one of the sea grapes in my backyard, and how it was very much affected by that freeze. Um, and so what they found in looking at this phenology data is that as the climate gets warmer, it's prompting many trees to leaf out earlier. And then what happens is you get these trees that, okay, it's warmer, it's leafing out earlier, and then a late spring frost comes and damages those young leaves. And so we would expect that, yes, that is going to damage those young leaves, and that year's growth is going to be probably decreased as a result of that stress or that damage. Um, but in examining the phenology data, they also found that not only did it affect the current year's growth when that freeze occurred, but it also delayed leaf emergence and reduced the productivity of that plant into the next calendar year. So these are impactful events, more impactful than we realized before. It's late season frost. Another example is researchers took data from the network and from other sources and put them together around observations of plants in an urban area, in this case, Chicago, Illinois. And they found that these community and professional scientists contributed about 171,000 observations of plants and 2,200 species of plants that were observed. And so that helped them to understand the capacity of cities to protect biodiversity locally. I mean, we sometimes we think about studying, our natural areas and our, state parks and national parks, but we are more and more urbanizing, and we need to look to those areas as well as sources of biodiversity also. And so this was a good way to use that citizen science to get an idea of what do we currently have and what can we do to improve our biodiversity and protect it, even in urban areas. And so this is another publication. In this case, they use the phenologic data and also tree rings to look at the host range of the spruce budworm. And they found that in addition to the host that they already knew of, that this budworm was also feeding on eastern hemlock. And so that is posing a risk for the hemlock conservation and the commercial harvest. So again, using that data contributed by citizen scientists, that, I don't expect that it was the, primary focus of that data, but to identify other hosts, these people were monitoring for phenologic events, but in the course of monitoring phenologic events, they found this as well, that, this is an important thing to be aware of, again, for the conservation of this commercially and otherwise important tree species, a group of tree species. So, and, from what I've seen as interacting with this data, more of it is available right now from citizen scientists that live in parts of the country where the seasons are more pronounced than they are here in South Florida. I asked Aaron Grady, with the network helped me put together some of the information for this presentation. Thank her for that and those resources. And this is one of the things that she contributed was these are the top 20 observed species in the southeastern US. And so, yeah, you can see a lot of these are things that occur further north than South Florida. Um, so we do need more data on phenology in some of our South Florida species. So if you want to get involved in that, here's one option. This is a project I went through the local phenology leader certification program last year and started fleshing out this program, and I'm currently recruiting people to be part of it. So the idea here is that, as I said, you all are doing this work in the landscape, and these are fields, working outside, outdoor work in the landscape, on the farm. It's we need the next generation to see the value, see the joy, see the opportunities in those lines of work. And if youth can connect with adult mentors in those fields around something like phenology, that can be a way of encouraging that engagement with these career fields. And it's also a way for the youth and adults to contribute to citizen science, and reporting and sharing in this network reporting, and getting outside, youth getting outside and exploring farms, exploring parks, exploring landscapes. And as they do so, again, connecting with people like yourselves who are in these careers, who are working amongst these plants and nurturing these habitats, urban and rural and ag habitats, in their day-to-day lives. So I'll share later ways to connect with me if this is something you want to learn more about, or if you want to start your own program. Okay, well, I'll be providing a link on how to get the certification. Yes, I think that's in here. If not, I'll get it to you. So this is, if you're wondering, like this, sometimes citizen science, it's like so many things that our groups contributed to. We kind of lose sight of who are the people behind these things, So then the network has done a great job they worked with students to interview some of the citizen scientist observers who contribute their phenology data, their phenology observations to the network. And then they wrote these kind of profiles on these folks. So this is one, this person, his name is Chris Peters. He's a photographer. He lives in Chicago, where there's a trail that looks, from the pictures on the website, like it's a very popular, well-used pedestrian trail. And it's called the Bloomingdale Trail. And along that trail are many different plants. You can see here some photographs he's taken of it through the seasons. So you can see, the one type of habitat that's there, and just how much it changes through the seasons in this more northern climate. He's focused on monitoring the serviceberry plants that are along the trail, and especially when those edible fruits become available. And for him, this has been a way to not only employ his love of and skill in photography to raising awareness of phenology, but also, he has concerns about climate change, and this helped him to gain an awareness of climate change, and also, I'm sure, feel like he is part of a solution, part of raising awareness and addressing something that can be worrisome for us all. And then this is a creative outlet for him as well with the photography. Some people may write as these students did and just demonstrate their creativity in that way. And it was a way to immerse himself in nature. He writes about how he, in his case, he worked mostly indoors in an office, and this gave him a reason to get out, connect with nature, connect with others, and decrease his levels of anxiety while also feeling that he's contributing to something for the greater good. So that's one example. And then this is another, these students in an environmental science class got involved in monitoring two different plants. One was redbud. You could see the redbud tree. I love the redbud tree. We don't have it here in South Florida, but they're monitoring the redbud tree. And in the process, the student wrote how they felt like they learned more about trees, and they learned about citizen science and ways that they can participate in science. They can be part of building that body of scientific knowledge that has benefit for us all. Another group was involved in monitoring an invasive plant, knotweed, and so they were able to. They learned about what is the best phenophase, the best life cycle stage to manage that weed, and in this case, manage it with herbicide. And then they monitored for the timing of when that phenophase occurred, so that that data could be used by people that manage this weed. And I think one of the students reported on how that particular weed takes over shorelines, and remembered back when his grandmother lived along a shoreline, and she would hand weed the knotweed and maintain that. And he felt like he was being a part of restoring these shorelines that had become kind of choked with this invasive weed. So they valued that they were contributing to environmental stewardship and contributing to science through this work. And so where does this data get entered? With the Nature's Notebook, part of the National Phenology Network, they have this tool called Nature's Notebook that you would use to enter your data online, or enter it in paper and put it online. And this tool is getting some upgrades that I believe are going to come out in early spring next year, or maybe before that. But one of the features is you'll be able to see your tracked sites on a map. So here's an example where these folks probably have this path that they walk, and they're monitoring a plant here, 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 and here, and here. And then you can make those observations, make notes. And here's what one of the data entry, part of the data entry page for plants. So that you would go to your designated plant that you're monitoring. In the case of Mr. Peters, he's looking at the service berries. So he'd come out there, and say, okay, do I see leaves? The plant loses its leaves at times of the year. So he'd note that, are any of the leaves falling? Are there flowers or flower buds? Are there fruits? And so that's what that data interface will look like in the new version. And you'll be able to drill down to really enter a lot of detailed data, or kind of more broad level data. So if you want to learn more or get involved, yes. So you can contact me if you're interested in learning more about my local project, or if you just want to talk more about starting your own local project. You can become an observer with the National Phenology Network, and this is their website here. You can, if you're curious, but you just want to learn more for now, you could subscribe to get their newsletters and start, learning about what all they're doing, and maybe get engaged down the road with it. That's an option there to sign up for a newsletter. Oh yeah, I'm doing great on time. Okay, so there's their website again, and I thank them, the folks at the network, for contributing some of the slides for this presentation. And I also wanted to share, I'm part of Extension, and a lot of people don't know that your Extension offices, we're lucky in Florida, we have Extension offices in all of our 67 counties, and each of our county Extension offices are funded in part by our county and sometimes also our city commissioners. So in my case, in Martin County, where we receive funding from Martin County and from the city of Stewart. And so, if you appreciate this work that we're doing here or in your county where you live, reach out, thank your commissioners for the service. And this is a QR code to thank our commissioners in Martin County if you'd like. And I want to thank you for your time today. And we've got a few more minutes if you have any questions. And this is the QR code for my email announcements. If some of y'all are from my area, I'm in Martin County. You want to subscribe to get my emails of programs that I'm offering. I also have a monthly blog digest of any blogs that I've written that month. And these are all, I write my blogs and write my emails to be relevant for farmers, landscapers, nursery growers. So check it out if you'd like to. And with that, that's it. So I'll take any questions that you might have. If I can stop this sharing. Okay, there we are. I can see everybody.
Yeah, if anyone's got questions, can either put them in the chat or you can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
I think. Has anyone done a citizen science for phenology or other types of citizen science previously? Some people have used iNaturalist or things like that. Yeah. Thank y'all. Yeah, I hope that, it helps me when I can relate to my work in a different way. And this phenology was a new way for me that was heartening. And have the virtual phenology annual meetings. So I just got involved with the network last year, and they had a virtual get together for local phenology leaders, and I participated in that. But I know they do have other convenings, conferences as well, and I haven't yet participated in those. Okay. And so Darlene has used phenology concepts for clients in some fieldwork projects. Do you want to unmute and share that, Darlene?
Okay, yeah. Am I coming through clearly?
Yes.
Okay. One of the projects I had is in an HOA where they had a pruning schedule, pruning contractor coming in, and there was a species of nesting bird that was actively nesting, and they had to halt that pruning schedule. So they hired me to go out and do a survey and look at where these birds were nesting and, get the nesting range, when they start, when they stop, and then go back out. And what I basically did was really simple. I went out and looked, and then took pictures and put ribbons around the trees that had the birds, so that the contractors could go ahead and prune it within the HOA the trees that did not have nesting birds. And then we went back out at the end of the season, and if it looked like there were no signs like, poop or sticks or things on the ground, then we flew a drone up and looked down from the top of the tree into the nest to make sure that either the nest was falling apart, there were no chicks, there were no eggs, there was no real evidence. And then we took the ribbons off, and then the contractor could finish pruning within the community.
Yeah, that's so good that you did that. And right, that's true. I didn't think of that at the time, that's an important part of it too, is the timing of, the timing of a pruning event, the timing of development, the timing of an herbicide application, and things like that. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay. The leadership program. I felt like the leadership program was really valuable. As you go through it, you're connecting with other people that are also going through the leadership program, and it's all virtual, so it could be people throughout the United States. And then at the same time, you're stepping through creating your program of what you'd like to do, and you start with some idea, and then you learn a little more and you refine your idea, and you keep coming back to a workbook. They have a workbook that you use to flesh out, what are your objectives with this? What happens, if you they talk about succession planning to make sure your project lives on, throughout the years, and what partners can you bring in? So it was really helpful. It wasn't just talking about it, it's talking about it and putting it together, planning for it so you can have the best chance of success. And sharing resources. They have a lot of resources that they share to help support you, as they shared with me in putting together this presentation. Okay. A question about the CEUs, the recording.
Oh.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think they're go ahead.
Yeah, we'll have the recording available. We'll put it on YouTube, and we'll email everyone after, probably today or tomorrow. And then if you got CEUs, we've just been processing everything per usual. It's taken a little bit longer than last year for ISA, but it still gets through. So, but with that said, yeah, if there's anything else, just don't be afraid to email us if you've got further questions. And Yvette seems to be kind of leading the charge here, in terms of folks in Extension that are looking into uh, phenology and seasonality. And I remember there were other folks that used to do this in the past, like Stephen Brown. He had some really good presentations looking at flowering at different parts of the year. And so this is maybe the latest iteration of this and an extension world here. So, but with that, I just wanted to say thank you to Yvette for your time and bringing this topic up and yeah, like
Thank you, John. And one more thing I wanted to add before I forget. If you're just curious about this and you want to engage with it a little more, Phenology Week is a great time. Phenology Week is usually in March, and the U.S. National Phenology Network has, they usually have throughout the week a series of different programs, from researchers talking about how they use the phenology data, Erin Posthumus, who somebody mentioned in the chat, she gives a wonderful, like, inspiring, motivating presentation. Just it's fun to, and you can tune into any part of it that you want to. So stay tuned or check back with them for Phenology Week 2027. And thank you, John, for this opportunity. And thanks all of y'all for participating in the chat and being here today.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. And we look forward to hopefully seeing a lot of you next month. And yeah, we'll follow up here via email as well. But let me just check the chat. Yeah, thank you all. Take care. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Yvette.